Melissa and Marcus had once been the kind of couple everyone admired. They met in college, two young souls from different worlds who fell deeply in love despite the challenges that came with their interracial relationship. Melissa was white, soft-spoken, and artistic, while Marcus was black, strong-willed, and driven by ambition. Their differences seemed like strengths at first, but over time, they became cracks in the foundation of their marriage. They lived in a small suburban neighborhood where people often whispered about them behind closed doors. Some neighbors didn't understand why Melissa would choose to marry someone so different from her background. Others judged Marcus for taking on too much by marrying outside his culture. These whispers slowly seeped into their lives, planting seeds of doubt in Melissa's mind. She began to wonder if she'd made the right choice, especially as life grew more complicated. Their family expanded quickly, 5 children in less than 12 years. The house was always noisy, messy, and full of laughter. But beneath the surface, there was tension. Marcus worked long hours at a construction job, coming home exhausted every night. He dreamed of starting his own business someday, but for now, he did what he could to provide for his growing family. Melissa, meanwhile, felt overwhelmed. Between caring for 5 kids and dealing with judgmental stares when she went out with her mixed-race family, she started to feel trapped. Money was tight, and arguments became frequent. Melissa wanted Marcus to spend more time at home, but he couldn't afford to cut back on work. When she suggested moving closer to her parents for support, Marcus refused. He didn't want to leave the community where he built connections. Cultural differences also played a role. Melissa missed celebrating holidays the way she used to with her family, while Marcus tried to introduce traditions from his side, which Melissa sometimes dismissed as unnecessary or unfamiliar. The breaking point came one cold winter evening. After yet another fight about finances, Melissa sat alone in the living room, staring at the Christmas tree. The kids were upstairs asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing downstairs. Marcus walked in, still wearing his work boots, looking tired and defeated. Instead of apologizing or trying to fix things, Melissa blurted out something she'd been thinking for months. "Maybe we'd all be better off without me here." Marcus froze, stunned. Before he could respond, Melissa stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door. That night, she packed a suitcase and left, taking the kids with her. She told herself it was for the best, that Marcus would never be able to handle raising 5 children alone, and that she needed space to figure out her life. Deep down, though, she knew she was running away, not just from her husband, but from the pressure of being a wife and mother in a world that constantly questioned her choices. For Marcus, the days that followed were a blur of heartbreak and panic. Friends offered condolences, but no one stayed long enough to help him pick up the pieces. Alone in the quiet house, surrounded by reminders of the family he'd lost, Marcus realized something important. He wasn't going to give up. If Melissa thought leaving was the answer, then he would prove her wrong. Whatever it took, he would show her, and himself, that he could be the father his children deserved. The days after Melissa left were some of the hardest Marcus had ever faced. The house, once filled with laughter and chaos, now felt eerily silent. It wasn't just the absence of Melissa that weighed on him. It was the emptiness left behind by his children. Their toys lay scattered across the living room floor, their school books still piled on the dining table, and their tiny shoes lined up by the door as if waiting for them to come home. But they weren't coming back, not anytime soon. Marcus tried calling Melissa repeatedly, hoping she'd change her mind or at least let him see the kids. Each time, his calls went unanswered. When he finally reached her after days of trying, her voice was cold and distant. "I need this, Marcus," she said firmly. "You'll manage. You always do." Her words stung more than he cared to admit. He wanted to scream, to beg her to reconsider, but deep down, he knew it wouldn't make a difference. She had already made up her mind. With no other choice, Marcus threw himself into survival mode. He began working even longer hours, picking up extra shifts at the construction site, and taking on odd jobs during his rare moments off. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Most nights, he collapsed onto the couch, too exhausted to climb the stairs to his bed. His friends and family urged him to ask for help, but Marcus refused. He didn't want anyone feeling sorry for him, or worse, doubting his ability to take care of his kids. "They're my responsibility," he told his sister when she offered to babysit. "I'm their father. This is what I signed up for." But being both parents wasn't easy. There were mornings when he woke up late because he'd been working until midnight, only to find the youngest crying in her crib because she was hungry. There were evenings when he burned dinner because he fell asleep while stirring the pot. And there were countless times when he sat at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills, wondering how he'd keep the lights on another month. Yet through it all, Marcus refused to give up. Every setback only fueled his determination to prove Melissa wrong, to show her that he could be everything their children needed. Slowly, things began to improve. Marcus learned to balance work and parenting, creating routines that kept the household running smoothly. He taught the older kids to help around the house, assigning chores like setting the table or folding laundry. On weekends, he took them to the park or played board games late into the night, doing whatever he could to fill the void left by Melissa's departure. For the first time in weeks, laughter returned to the house. Not the same kind they'd shared before, but enough to remind Marcus why he fought so hard every day. Still, there were moments when the loneliness hit him like a punch to the gut. Late at night, after tucking the kids into bed, he'd sit alone on the porch, staring at the stars. He thought about Melissa often, wondering where she was, what she was doing, whether she ever thought about them. Part of him hoped she'd realize her mistake and come back. But another part of him, the stronger part, knew that hoping for her return wouldn't solve anything. What mattered most was the 5 little lives depending on him to keep going, no matter how tough things got. As the months passed, Marcus started dreaming bigger. He realized that working endless hours at the construction site wasn't sustainable if he wanted to truly provide for his family. So he began researching ways to start his own business, a dream he put on hold years ago. With grit and determination, he saved every penny he could, learning everything he needed to turn his vision into reality. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Marcus faced it head-on, determined to build a future his children could be proud of, one where they never doubted how much their father loved them. As the years rolled by, Marcus poured every ounce of his energy into building a better life for his children. At first, it was just about survival, keeping food on the table, paying the bills, and making sure everyone had clean clothes to wear. But as time went on, Marcus began to dream bigger. He wanted more than just stability. He wanted success, for himself and for his kids. The idea of starting his own business had always been in the back of his mind, but with 5 children depending on him, taking such a risk seemed impossible. Still, Marcus refused to let fear hold him back. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, he'd sit at the kitchen table with a notebook, jotting down ideas and sketching out plans. He spent hours researching online, learning everything he could about entrepreneurship. It wasn't easy. He didn't have much money to invest, and there were days when doubt crept in. But Marcus reminded himself why he was doing this. His family deserved a brighter future, and he was determined to give it to them. His big break came unexpectedly. One day, while working at the construction site, Marcus overheard a conversation between 2 coworkers about how hard it was to find reliable home repair services in their area. A light bulb went off in his head. Why not start small? He already knew the ins and outs of construction work, and he had a truck that could double as a service vehicle. With nothing to lose, Marcus decided to take the leap. He started modestly, offering basic handyman services like fixing leaky faucets, repairing fences, and painting rooms. Word spread quickly thanks to Marcus's dedication and attention to detail. Clients appreciated his honesty and willingness to go above and beyond, often recommending him to friends and neighbors. Within months, what began as a side hustle turned into a steady stream of clients. Marcus worked tirelessly, balancing his new venture with caring for his kids. Some days, he brought the older ones along to job sites, teaching them valuable skills while keeping an eye on them. They learned the value of hard work early on, watching their dad sweat under the sun to provide for them. As his business grew, so did Marcus's confidence. He reinvested his earnings into better tools, a bigger truck, and eventually hiring part-time workers to help with larger projects. By the 5th year, Marcus had expanded into full-scale renovations, remodeling kitchens, bathrooms, and even entire homes. His company became known for quality craftsmanship and fair prices, earning him glowing reviews and repeat customers. People admired not only his work ethic, but also his resilience as a single father who never gave up, no matter how tough things got. Meanwhile, Marcus made sure his kids stayed grounded despite their newfound financial stability. He encouraged them to focus on school, emphasizing that education was the key to unlocking opportunities. The older ones took his advice to heart. Sarah, the eldest, earned a scholarship to study nursing. James, the second oldest, discovered a passion for graphic design and landed an internship at a local studio. Even the younger ones thrived under his guidance. Emma developed a love for art, Liam excelled in basketball, and little Zoe became known for her infectious laugh and curiosity about the world. Through it all, Marcus remained humble. He never forgot where he came from or the struggles he faced during those early years. Though Melissa was absent, her decision to leave pushed him to become the best version of himself, not just as a provider, but as a role model for his children. Looking back, Marcus realized that losing her had been painful, but it also forced him to dig deep and discover strengths he didn't know he had. By the 10th year, Marcus's life looked completely different from the chaos of that first lonely winter without Melissa. His business was thriving, his kids were happy and successful in their own ways, and he finally felt at peace. While he still thought about Melissa occasionally, wondering if she ever regretted leaving, he no longer harbored anger or resentment. Instead, he focused on gratitude for the family he built, the obstacles he overcame, and the lessons he learned along the way. Little did he know, however, that soon enough, the past would catch up with him in ways he couldn't have imagined. 10 years had passed since Melissa walked out of Marcus's life, leaving behind not just her husband, but also the 5 children who once called her Mom. For a long time, she tried to convince herself that she'd made the right choice. She told herself that starting over was necessary, not just for her own happiness, but for the kids too. After all, how could she have given them a good life when she felt so lost and overwhelmed? But as the years went by, the guilt began to creep in, quietly at first, then louder, until it became impossible to ignore. Melissa's new life looked perfect on the surface. She remarried a wealthy businessman named Richard, moved into a sprawling house with pristine white walls and marble floors, and filled her days with shopping trips, charity events, and yoga classes. Yet beneath the polished exterior, something felt hollow. Her relationship with Richard was comfortable, but lacking in passion. There were no deep conversations, no shared dreams, just polite exchanges and scheduled dinners. And though she tried to fill the void by throwing herself into hobbies and social activities, nothing seemed to ease the ache in her heart. Social media didn't help either. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, Melissa stumbled upon a post celebrating Marcus's achievements. It was written by a local blogger who praised him as a self-made entrepreneur and a devoted single father. The article included photos of Marcus standing proudly beside his thriving business, a far cry from the struggling man she remembered. There were pictures of his kids too, now grown into confident young adults. Sarah wearing a graduation cap, James holding up an art portfolio, Emma painting vibrant murals, Liam dunking a basketball, and little Zoe flashing her signature toothy grin. Melissa stared at the screen, tears welling up in her eyes. How had they become such remarkable people without her? That night, sleep eluded her. Memories flooded back. The sound of her children's laughter, the warmth of their tiny hands clutching hers, the way they used to run to her after school. She wondered if they ever thought about her or if they resented her for leaving. Did they blame her for abandoning them? Or worse, had they simply forgotten her altogether? The question swirled in her mind, keeping her awake until dawn broke. The next morning, Melissa made a decision. She couldn't keep running from the past. It was time to face it head-on. With trembling fingers, she opened her laptop and searched for Marcus online. His business website popped up instantly, complete with contact information. Taking a deep breath, she typed out a message. *Hi Marcus, I hope this message finds you well. I know it's been a long time, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to reach out. I've thought about you and the kids often and would love to reconnect if possible. Please let me know how they're doing. Melissa. Hitting send felt like stepping off a cliff. Would he respond? Would he lash out, calling her selfish and reckless? Or would he ignore her completely, treating her like the ghost she feared she'd become in their lives? As she waited anxiously for a reply, Melissa realized something important. Whatever happened next, she owed it to her children and to herself to try. For 10 years, she'd avoided facing the consequences of her actions. Now, whether Marcus welcomed her back or shut her out forever, she was ready to take responsibility for the family she'd left behind. When Marcus saw Melissa's name pop up on his phone, he froze. It had been 10 years since he last heard from her, and the sight of her message stirred a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, curiosity, and even a flicker of hope. He read the words over and over again, trying to make sense of them. Was this real? Had she really reached out after all these years? At first, Marcus considered ignoring the message altogether. What could she possibly say that would change anything? She'd left him and their children without looking back, leaving him to pick up the pieces. But as the initial shock wore off, he realized something important. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about the kids, the 5 young adults who had grown into incredible people despite the challenges they faced. If Melissa wanted to reconnect with them, it wasn't his place to stand in the way. Still, Marcus knew the situation required careful handling. The kids hadn't mentioned their mother in years, and he wasn't sure how they'd react to hearing from her now. Some might be curious, while others could feel hurt or angry. He decided to approach the matter gently, starting with Sarah, the eldest. Over dinner one evening, he broached the topic casually. "Hey, I got a message from your mom the other day," he said, watching her closely for a reaction. Sarah paused mid-bite, her fork hovering above her plate. What did she want? She asked, her tone guarded but not entirely cold. "She wants to reconnect," Marcus explained. "She asked about you guys and if she could reach out." Sarah frowned, setting her fork down. "Does she think she can just waltz back into our lives after all this time?" Her voice carried a mix of frustration and disbelief, but there was also a hint of vulnerability beneath it. Marcus reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "I don't know what she's thinking," he admitted, "but I do know that I won't force any of you to see her if you're not ready. Whatever happens next is up to you." Over the next few days, Marcus spoke individually with each of the kids, giving them space to process their feelings. James, always the quiet thinker, seemed intrigued by the idea of meeting Melissa again, though he kept his emotions hidden behind a stoic expression. Emma expressed outright anger, saying she didn't understand why Melissa deserved a second chance. Liam shrugged it off, claiming he barely remembered her anyway, while Zoe, the youngest, looked confused and unsure of what to feel. Once everyone had weighed in, Marcus sent Melissa a reply. His message was polite but firm. "The kids are doing well, and they've grown into amazing people. If you'd like to reconnect, I'll arrange a family gathering where you can meet them. But please understand, it's up to them whether they want to build a relationship with you." Melissa responded quickly, thanking him for considering her request and agreeing to attend the gathering. When the day arrived, tension hung thick in the air. Melissa arrived nervously, dressed in an elegant yet understated outfit, clutching a bouquet of flowers like a peace offering. The moment she stepped through the door, the atmosphere shifted. The older kids stared at her with mixed expressions: curiosity, suspicion, resentment, while the younger ones glanced at her with cautious curiosity. Marcus greeted her warmly, doing his best to ease the awkwardness. "Welcome," he said simply, gesturing for her to come inside. "The kids are here. Let's take this one step at a time." As the afternoon unfolded, conversations started hesitantly. Melissa shared stories about her life, apologizing repeatedly for leaving and expressing pride in how far the kids had come. At first, the responses were lukewarm, polite but distant. But as the hours passed, small bridges began to form. Sarah asked questions about Melissa's childhood, finding common ground in shared memories. James showed her his artwork, sparking genuine interest from Melissa. Even Zoe warmed up slightly, giggling at a silly joke Melissa told. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was far from it. But it was a start. For the first time in a decade, Melissa found herself face to face with the family she'd abandoned, realizing just how much work lay ahead if she hoped to rebuild the bonds she'd broken. And Marcus, standing quietly in the background, watched it all unfold, knowing he'd done the right thing by bringing them together, even if the road to healing would be long and uncertain. The family gathering wasn't what anyone expected, least of all Melissa. She had imagined warm hugs, tears of joy, and instant forgiveness. Instead, she walked into a room filled with guarded expressions, awkward silences, and a palpable tension that made her heart sink. The kids weren't the same little ones she'd left behind 10 years ago. They were grown now, independent, and carrying scars they weren't ready to share. At first, no one spoke much. Melissa sat at the edge of the couch, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline, while the kids exchanged hesitant glances. Marcus tried to break the ice by offering snacks and drinks, but even his efforts couldn't fully ease the unease in the air. Finally, Sarah, the eldest, spoke up. "So," she began cautiously, "what made you decide to reach out now?" Melissa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I've thought about you all every day since I left," she admitted softly. "But I was scared. Scared of facing everything I'd done wrong. Seeing pictures of how amazing you've become, it made me realize I needed to try." Her honesty seemed to soften some of the walls, though not completely. James leaned forward slightly, curiosity getting the better of him. "What was it like? Your new life, I mean." Melissa sighed, running a hand through her hair. It looked perfect on the outside. A big house, nice things. But inside, it felt empty. "I missed being part of something real, something meaningful." Her voice cracked as she added, "I missed you guys." Emma, who had been quiet until then, crossed her arms and frowned. "That's hard to believe," she said bluntly. "You didn't miss us enough to call or visit." "Not once." The room fell silent again, the weight of Emma's words hanging heavily. Melissa swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "You're right," she whispered. "I should have reached out sooner. There's no excuse for staying away for so long. All I can do now is apologize, and hope you'll let me make things right." Liam, ever the laid-back one, shrugged nonchalantly. "Honestly, I don't really remember much about you," he said. "I mean, I know you're my mom, but you haven't been around. Dad raised us. He did everything." Zoe, the youngest, tilted her head curiously. "Are you going to leave again?" she asked innocently, her wide eyes searching Melissa's face for answers. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. She knelt down to Zoe's level, meeting her gaze directly. "No," she promised firmly. "I'm not leaving again. I want to be here, for all of you, if you'll let me." For a moment, Zoe simply stared at her, then nodded shyly before retreating behind Marcus's leg. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. It was progress. As the afternoon wore on, the conversations became less formal and more natural. James showed Melissa his art portfolio, explaining each piece with pride. Emma reluctantly joined in when Melissa complimented her mural skills, admitting she wanted to pursue painting professionally someday. Sarah shared stories about college life, laughing alongside Melissa as if they were old friends reconnecting after years apart. Even Liam loosened up, joking around and teaching Melissa how to dribble a basketball in the backyard. Through it all, Marcus remained the steady anchor, ensuring the mood stayed light and supportive. He stepped in whenever tensions flared, gently redirecting the conversation to safer topics. His calm presence gave everyone permission to take their time, to feel whatever they needed without judgment. By the end of the day, Melissa felt emotionally drained but hopeful. The kids hadn't forgiven her, not fully, but they hadn't shut her out either. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she might earn back their trust, step by painful step. As she hugged each of them goodbye, her arms lingered just a second longer than necessary, silently promising to keep trying. Driving home that night, Melissa realized something profound. Reconnecting wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But seeing her children laugh, argue, and dream together reminded her why she'd come back in the first place. They were worth every effort, every apology, every tear. And for the first time in a decade, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to being their mom. In the weeks following the family gathering, Melissa found herself reflecting deeply on everything she had learned about Marcus and their children. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how much she didn't know, not only about the lives her kids had built for themselves, but also about the man who had raised them alone. One evening, unable to shake off her curiosity, she decided to reach out to Marcus privately. "Can we talk?" she asked when he picked up the phone, her voice trembling slightly. "There's so much I don't understand about how you managed everything." Marcus hesitated for a moment before agreeing. They met at a quiet cafe near his office, a neutral place where they could speak openly without stirring up old emotions. Melissa arrived first, nervously fidgeting with her hands as she waited. When Marcus walked in, his calm demeanor immediately put her at ease. "I owe you an apology," Melissa began once they were seated, "not just for leaving, but for underestimating you. I always assumed I was the better parent, the one who cared more, who knew what the kids needed. But after seeing how far they've come, I realize I couldn't have been more wrong." Marcus listened quietly, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. "It wasn't easy," he admitted finally. "There were nights when I didn't think I'd make it through. Nights when I wondered if I was failing them. But I never stopped trying. They deserved that much." Melissa nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "You did more than try. You succeeded. You gave them stability, love, and opportunities I couldn't have provided back then. You turned our kids into these amazing people, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that." For the first time, Marcus allowed himself to open up about the struggles he faced during those early years. He told her about working double shifts, surviving on little sleep, and teaching himself how to braid hair for Zoe or bake cookies for school events. He shared stories of late-night talks with Sarah about college applications, coaching James through self-doubt over his art, and cheering Liam on during basketball games. Each memory painted a vivid picture of a father who had poured every ounce of himself into raising his children. "You sacrificed everything," Melissa said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "And here I am, living this comfortable life while you carried the weight of it all. How do you not hate me for that?" To her surprise, Marcus smiled faintly. "Hate takes too much energy," he replied. "Besides, holding on to anger wouldn't have helped anyone. My focus was always on the kids, making sure they grew up knowing they were loved, no matter what." His words struck a chord deep within Melissa. She realized that Marcus hadn't just been a provider. He had been a protector, shielding their children from the pain of abandonment while giving them the tools to thrive. It was humbling and inspiring. As the conversation continued, Melissa opened up about her own regrets. She confessed that leaving hadn't brought her the peace she'd hoped for. Instead, It left her feeling hollow, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit anywhere. She spoke candidly about the guilt she carried, the sleepless nights spent wondering if her kids hated her, and the shame she felt whenever she saw glimpses of their accomplishments online. "I want to earn their trust back," she said earnestly. "But I know it won't happen overnight. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, even if it means starting as a stranger and working my way up." Marcus nodded approvingly. "They need time," he said. "And so do you. Don't rush it. Just keep showing up for the big moments and the small ones. That's what matters most." By the end of their meeting, Melissa felt lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of Marcus's strength and resilience. More importantly, she saw the path forward, a chance to rebuild relationships, however slowly, and prove to her children that she was sincere in her desire to reconnect. As they parted ways, Melissa turned to Marcus one last time. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "For everything." Marcus simply nodded, offering her a small smile. "We're all doing the best we can," he said. "That's all anyone can ask for." Months turned into a year, and Melissa slowly began to rebuild her relationships with her children. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, awkward silences, and even outright rejection, but she refused to give up. Marcus had been right. It was about showing up consistently, not just for the big milestones, but also for the everyday moments that mattered most. She started small, sending texts to check in or leaving thoughtful voicemails when calls went unanswered. At first, the responses were sparse, but over time, they became more frequent. Sarah, ever the responsible one, agreed to meet for coffee occasionally, sharing updates about her nursing program and listening cautiously as Melissa opened up about her life. James invited her to his art gallery opening, where Melissa proudly stood beside him, beaming as strangers complimented his work. Emma remained guarded, but she softened slightly when Melissa attended one of her mural unveilings, offering genuine praise for her talent. Liam continued to act indifferent, though he secretly appreciated the basketball tickets she sent him, using them to bond with friends. And Zoe, the youngest, grew fonder of Melissa with each visit, often asking her to read bedtime stories during weekend stays at Marcus's house. Melissa made sure never to overstep. She respected the boundaries Marcus had set, understanding that he was still the primary parent in their lives. Instead, she focused on building trust, proving through actions rather than words that she was committed to being part of their world again. She attended family gatherings when invited, helped out with school projects when asked, and celebrated holidays alongside them, even if her presence felt unfamiliar at first. One particularly memorable moment came during Christmas, when Melissa joined the family for dinner at Marcus's home. The table was filled with laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to the tense reunion months earlier. As dessert was served, Zoe tugged at Melissa's sleeve and whispered, "You can come back next year too, okay?" Melissa blinked back tears, nodding silently as she hugged her youngest daughter close. Marcus watched it all unfold with quiet pride. He hadn't expected Melissa to stick around, let alone put in the effort she had. But seeing her interact with the kids reminded him of why he'd agreed to this reunion in the first place, to give them closure, no matter how messy or complicated the process might be. Over time, the animosity he once felt toward her faded, replaced by gratitude for the role she was finally stepping into. By the end of the second year, things weren't perfect, but they were better. Melissa wasn't their mom in the traditional sense, not yet, but she was becoming someone they could rely on, someone who cared enough to keep trying. The older kids began inviting her to important events, while the younger ones grew comfortable enough to call her just to share their day. Even Marcus noticed a shift. Conversations between them became less formal, more collaborative, as they navigated co-parenting from afar. Looking back, Melissa realized how far she'd come since that cold winter night 10 years ago when she walked out the door. Leaving had been the biggest mistake of her life, but returning and staying, was the hardest thing she'd ever done. It taught her patience, humility, and the true meaning of unconditional love. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if it was a place she had to fight to reclaim. As she sat on Marcus's porch one evening, watching Zoe chase fireflies in the backyard, Melissa felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was ready to face them. One step, one conversation, one memory at a time. Her family wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was worth everything.